Hello, thanks for tuning in. This is Dr. B. Let's get to it. Let's tackle a difficult topic. Let's talk about forgiveness. The world tells us to forgive and forget. From the pulpits, we repeatedly hear forgiveness is mandatory. They speak of it almost as if there's a switch. We can flip on to forgive, flip off, not. If it were only that easy. Too many people have a misconception about what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not. Some people, for example, believe that if you forgive someone, then you're condoning what their behavior was. Some folks believe that if you forgive someone, then you have to renew the relationship with them. Some folks really struggle with this whole issue of forgetting. You know, the messages, the memories that are logged in our brain are chemically coded and electrically coded, and they don't just go away. So the forgetting part sets us up for failure from the very beginning. Now, I do believe we can forgive, which is a process, and we need to take the time to go through that process. But forgetting, that is a whole other issue. So if that is a person's goal, they're not going to reach it. Now, the rule of thumb that we need to use, in my opinion, is this. If I've truly gone through the process of forgiving someone, then I reach a point where that emotional punch that generally goes along with, memories of what happened, and we're talking about memories of everything from betrayal to, abuse, various forms of offenses, things that generally we can think of which regard the need for forgiveness. So when we're exposed to those memories, or we're exposed to reminders, situations, language, or even the people, that it may trigger those old memories of hurt and pain that went along with that abandonment, betrayal, abuse. But as we work through that process of forgiveness, again, it does not have that emotional punch. We see that decrease. Also, if we are plagued by many thoughts, many memories, we should see those decline over time as well, if indeed we have tackled the process of forgiving. Now, many people, again, have struggled with this whole aspect of forgiveness, and we need to look at how to do it, because that is an area that just does not get addressed, whether we're talking about the world as a whole or whether we're talking about from the pulpit. So we are going to dive into some aspects of how to go through that process in just a moment. There are obstacles to forgiving, and these can reflect some truth. Sometimes people will say, the offense was just too big. They will think the person does not deserve to be forgiven. The person has not asked for forgiveness. And all those things may have some truth in them. It may be a matter of it was a very big offense, especially when I think about loved ones that have betrayed us, when I think about abuse in particular. Those are big. Those are big things. When it comes to them not asking for forgiveness, That's very true too. Often the person who has been the offender has not asked for forgiveness. They may not be able to. They may be deceased. They may, and this happens unfortunately too frequently, they may not even see that they offended or take ownership of it. And, see nothing there, or if they see just a mild slight from their standpoint, not seeing the damage that they've done, then what they will do is take the perspective of, you just need to get over it. Again, another switch that we can't simply switch. Unfortunately, a lot of people also fall into the trap of, to be a good person or to be consistent with my religious beliefs, I need to forgive. So they rush into forgiveness. They said, "Oh, I'm just forgiving," and try to move on. The unfortunate thing there is that rule of thumb we talked about earlier points to the fact that true forgiveness really hasn't happened, because the memories continue to recur. The emotional punch continues to be there. When we're talking about forgiveness, we're really talking about being able to disconnect emotionally, not with regard to memory, but emotionally from the past, not allow it to continue to have power and influence over us, because let's face it, if we've gone through a significant trauma, it tends to affect our choices, affect our relationship, affect things like trust in the future. And do we really want those people and those incidents in the past to have that level of control? And my answer to that is no, we don't. So what do? We can't rush into forgiveness, and we don't want them to have control. So let me plant this seed, because we usually believe, or so many people do, that forgiveness is a gift that we give someone that's undeserving. And again, there is truth to that as well. What I would propose is, let's think of forgiveness as a gift we give ourselves. Because if I am able to truly forgive, that is me taking back control, not allowing the past to control me, not allowing the influence of, this person to continue in a negative way. It's also been referred to as re-inflicted self-injury if we don't forgive. We continue to pummel ourselves, perhaps, with those memories. So let's take a look at what we can do to achieve this process. And I'm sure you've noticed I've underlined that word repeatedly here. The process of forgiving. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we need to admit the reality of what occurred to ourselves. Some folks still have denial operating, where they are not admitting what happened. It can go to that extreme. Or they minimize it where it happened, but it really wasn't that big a deal. We're talking about taking an honest, realistic look at what happened, how it affected us, and how it has influence in the future. And in the midst of that too, how it all made us feel. So that's the first step I would propose, is let's take a realistic view of what happened. Let's admit the damage that was done, the hurt that occurred, and I would emphasize who was responsible for this. When we're talking about a betrayer, when we're talking about someone that has been abusive, the primary weight of responsibility rests with them. One of the unfortunate issues we deal with in cases of abuse with children and also with ladies is that they often take that mantle of responsibility for what happened on themselves. If only I'd have been better, if only I'd have done this, if only if I'd seen this coming. So one of the first steps in dealing with those kind of situations is to make very clear who is responsible and why they're responsible. You know, abusers are folks that have made choices, and their choices concerning power and control, manipulation, and self-gratification. And that also happens with issues like abandonment and betrayal. So let's just be really clear. These things of trauma have happened, and they've had possibly a traumatic effect on us and our lives. But who is responsible? Let's see that really clearly, because that frees us up then to move on to the second step. And the second step involves this, and that is taking an inventory of that damage that we kind of reviewed in step one by looking at the reality of what happened and how it affected us. And I would suggest that we take the time to journal or write what is referred to as a phantom letter, which is a letter that's not necessarily meant to be sent, although sometimes it is. But it's addressed to the person that has committed the offense. And it outlines several things that I think are quite important, that are key. One is, what happened? What was done? What did they do? What were the circumstances? These are just kind of the facts of the case, so to speak. You know, what happened? Who was involved? Then we need to move to a second step, which is, how did it make you feel, and how does it make you feel now? What impact emotionally did it have, and does it have on you? Then the third step is including how it affects the future, how it has affected me since this has happened, and how it kind of projects itself into the future. And again, it can have to do with trust issues. It can have to do with not taking chances. It certainly can have an impact on relationships. For some people, if it had to do with career, it will involve career choices for the future. I mean, there are just a bevy of possible impact areas when we think about going through a trauma that's not yet resolved. So I would suggest jotting these things down. And then we get to the fourth step, which is, I need to grieve these things. You know, this involves loss. This involves pain. This involves hurt that I've gone through. And if it's at the hands of someone that I thought loved me, even more so. I need to grieve. I need to give myself permission to do that. Just because we're looking at forgiving, which is, again, releasing the past, disconnecting from it. Also, I would say giving up the right isn't quite the right word, but to seek vengeance. We relinquish that. For those of us who are more of a spiritual bent, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I'm going to go ahead and let Him deal with it. But I need to forgive so I can move on. And again, that can be tough, and it's a process, meaning it takes time. So when I grieve, I need to give myself time to grieve that. These things did happen. I wish they hadn't happened. They probably should not have happened in any form or fashion. And this person is primarily responsible for this, if not completely responsible for it. And I'm making a decision, a willful act, a volitional act, that I am not going to allow this person and these circumstances and the past to shackle me from this point on and into my future. I'm going to heal, and I'm going to move on. So I wish I could give you a rule of thumb as far as how long it takes to do the grieving. For some people, it might be the same day they just get these things out and get them on paper. There's such a thing that used to be referred to as catharsis, which was just kind of getting it off our chest, going all the way back to Sigmund Freud. And for some people, that's it. They can reach that point, and it's like, okay, I can let this go now. I can let this go. And I would suggest saying out loud and or writing down, I as of this date, I forgive this person. I'm moving on. For some folks, it may take a week or a couple of weeks or longer. So just give yourself time to grieve, but aim at taking back what's been stolen from you. Forgiveness is not an easy thing to do, especially when the hurts are deep. But keeping in mind it is a gift we give ourselves. It's not about the other person, whether they want to receive the gift, whether or not they've acknowledged the damage that was done. I'll leave you with one last thought here, because this is also a misconception that folks often have. And let me just use this example. If I'm walking down the street and someone is coming towards me, and when they reach me, they haul back and just kick me as hard as they can in the seat of my pants. That person is the offender. I've done nothing there I should not have done, and then they just walk away. The next day I'm walking down the same street, and here is this person, and they do it again. Then the next day I'm walking down that street and I see the person approaching. I'm crossing the street, and I'm not going to give them an opportunity to do that again. Some people are under the misconception that forgiveness means we maintain unhealthy relationships, that we give people more opportunities to offend, to damage us. There are some exceptions, though, to what I'm about to say, and that is sometimes we have close family members and we need to try to work things out. But sometimes what I'm about to say also applies even to close family members. There are folks that are toxic. They have so many of their own issues that they can drain us, either emotionally or with regard to who and what we trust. Question ourselves. I mean, there are many impacts, but there are some relationships that just simply need to end. Forgiving doesn't mean being stupid. I hope this helps, and if you ever struggle or have struggled or are struggling with forgiveness, I ask that perhaps you try to apply some of these principles. All right. Bye-bye.